She's just a tray with legs, gentlemen. She doesn't speak French, Sebastian Sterling sneered, raising his glass of vintage Bordeaux. The table erupted in cruel laughter, thinking the girl pouring their water was deaf to their mockery. But they didn't see her knuckles turn white. They didn't know who she really was, or the secret she was hiding beneath that cheap polyester uniform. Sebastian thought he held all the cards, but with 4 words of perfect, fluid Parisian French, the invisible waitress was about to burn his empire to the ground. This is the story of how arrogance became a billionaire's most expensive mistake. The rain in Manhattan didn't wash things clean. It just made the grime slicker. Inside Le Miroir, however, the world was hermetically sealed against the grime. Here, the air smelled of white truffles, beeswax polish, and old money. Chloe Bennet adjusted her apron for the 10th time that hour, catching her reflection in the darkened window of the service station. At 24, she looked tired. Her blonde hair was pulled back so tightly it ached, pinned into the mandatory, severe bun that Le Miroir's maître d', a tyrannical man named Henri Gautier, insisted upon. "Posture, Bennet, you are slouching like a fisherwoman," Henri hissed as he breezed past her, clutching a leather-bound reservation book like a Bible. "Sorry, Henri," Chloe murmured, straightening her spine until it popped. She was invisible here. That was the job description. Le Miroir wasn't just a restaurant. It was a theater for the financial elite of New York City. The patrons didn't want to see the people serving them. They wanted food to appear as if summoned by magic. Chloe was good at being invisible. She had been practicing for 3 years, ever since the scandal that had stripped her family name of its weight and forced her into the shadows. Tonight was a Tuesday, usually a slow night, but the kitchen was vibrating with a nervous, frantic energy. "He's coming," whispered Sarah, a fellow server, as she hurriedly polished a wine glass. Sarah's hands were shaking. "I heard he specifically requested the agonizingly expensive 1982 Pitrou." "Who?" Chloe asked, though she had a sinking feeling she knew. The ecosystem of Le Miroir only trembled like this for a handful of predators. "Sebastian Sterling," Sarah said, her voice dropping to a terrified hush. "And he's bringing the delegation from Lyon. The rumors are true. Sterling Corp is trying to buy out Rivière Tech." Chloe felt a cold stone settle in her stomach. Sebastian Sterling. The name was synonymous with hostile takeovers and a specific brand of corporate cruelty that left thousands unemployed while stock prices soared. He was 32, handsome in a way that suggested he'd sell his own soul for a slightly better jawline, and notoriously abusive to service staff. "Great," Chloe muttered, checking her station. "Just keep your head down, Sarah. It's just dinner." "Not for me," Sarah said, looking pale. "Henry put me on table 4, the private alcove. That's Sterling's table." Chloe looked at Sarah. The girl was sweet, barely 21, and prone to panic attacks when customers raised their voices. Sebastian Sterling didn't just raise his voice, he eviscerated people for sport. "You'll be fine," Chloe lied. But 20 minutes later, Sarah wasn't fine. As the heavy oak doors swung open and Sebastian Sterling strode in, flanked by 3 serious-looking men in grey suits and 1 older, dignified man who looked distinctly French, the atmosphere in the room compressed. Sterling was taller than he looked in the tabloids. He wore a navy suit that likely cost more than Chloe's annual rent, cut to emphasize his broad shoulders. He didn't wait to be seated. He walked straight toward the private alcove, as if he owned the building. Henri scurried after him, bowing low. "Monsieur Sterling, a pleasure as always. We have prepared the—" "Wine," Sterling cut him off, not even looking at him. "Now. And get this table cleared. There's a smudge on the cutlery." There was no smudge. Chloe could see the gleam of the silver from across the room. It was a power move. Sarah approached the table with the water pitcher. She was trembling. As she poured into Sterling's glass, her elbow bumped the edge of his bread plate. A tiny, almost imperceptible clatter. Sterling stopped talking. The entire restaurant seemed to hold its breath. He slowly turned his head to look at Sarah. "Get out," he said softly. "So, sir, I'm so sorry. I don't want an apology. I want competence," Sterling said, his voice rising just enough to carry. "Henri, get this incompetence out of my sight and bring me someone who doesn't possess the dexterity of a toddler." Sarah burst into tears and fled toward the kitchen. Henri looked panic-stricken. He scanned the room, his eyes landing on Chloe. Chloe froze. She knew that look. It was the look of a general sacrificing a pawn. "Bennett," Henri snapped, waving her over. "Table 4. Now, do not speak unless spoken to. Do not breathe too loudly. And for the love of God, do not embarrass me." Chloe took a deep breath, smoothing her apron. She wasn't just walking to a table. She was walking into a lion's den. But what Henri, and certainly Sebastian Sterling, didn't know was that Chloe Bennett wasn't just a waitress from Queens. Before the debt, before the fall, Chloe had been Chloe Beaumont, and she had spent her summers in Leon. Chloe approached the table with the silent grace of a ghost. She replaced the smudged cutlery without a sound. Sebastian Sterling was deep in conversation with the older French man. Chloe recognized him from the financial papers she still read in secret. Antoine Dubois, the CEO of Rivière Tech. He was the target, the man Sterling was trying to charm or bully into selling his life's work. "We start with the foie gras," Sterling announced in English, leaning back in his chair. "And the pétrus. Open it immediately." Chloe nodded, her face a mask of polite indifference. "Yes, sir." She moved to the side station to decant the wine. As she worked, the conversation at table 4 shifted. "I hope you are hungry, Antoine," Sterling said, switching to English. "The chef here is adequate." Antoine Dubois smiled politely, his eyes tired. "The food is of little consequence, Sebastian. We are here to discuss the terms." "Terms," Sterling scoffed, waving a hand. He leaned in closer to his 2 associates, Americans named Miller and Vance. Then he did something that made Chloe's hands pause over the corkscrew for a fraction of a second. He switched languages. "Look at him," Sterling said in French. His accent was decent, clearly expensive boarding school French, but it lacked soul. It was mechanical. "Regardez-le. He looks like he's ready to fold. We push him on the pension fund clause tonight." Dubois stiffened slightly, but said nothing. He replied in rapid, complex French. "The pension fund is non-negotiable, Mr. Sterling. My workers have been with me for 30 years. Sterling laughed, a sharp, barking sound. He turned to Miller and Vance, switching back to English for a moment. He's clinging to the old ways. Cute. Then, back to French, addressing Dubois. "Antoine, we can worry about the workers later. Let's enjoy the wine." Chloe returned to the table with the decanter. She poured a splash for Sterling to taste. He swirled it, sniffed it, and took a sip. He didn't look at her. To him, she was a robot, arm pouring red liquid. "This waitress," Sterling said in French to Dubois, gesturing vaguely at Chloe with his wine glass. "She has a face like a frightened rabbit, doesn't she?" Chloe didn't blink. She finished pouring the wine, turning the bottle perfectly to prevent a drip. Dubois looked at Chloe, his eyes softening with a hint of pity. "She is just doing her job, Sebastian. Be kind." "Kindness is for people who can't afford power," Sterling sneered in French. "Besides, look at her. Blank stare. The lights are on, but nobody's home. It's amazing how these people go through life with absolutely no ambition. He looked directly at Chloe, a smirk playing on his lips. He wanted to see if she reacted. He was testing the waters, seeing if it was safe to speak freely. Chloe met his gaze. It took every ounce of her willpower not to narrow her eyes. Instead, she gave a vacuous, polite smile. "Is the wine to your liking, sir?" she asked in flat American English. Sterling turned back to Dubois, delighted. "See? Nothing. She doesn't understand a word. We can discuss the real numbers, the ones we aren't showing the regulators." Chloe's heart hammered against her ribs. This wasn't just insults. This was fraud. Sterling was about to discuss illegal dealings right in front of her, protected by the arrogance that a waitress couldn't possibly understand the nuances of corporate French. She retreated to the shadows of the service station, her blood boiling. "The acquisition creates a monopoly in the sector," Dubois was arguing, his voice low and urgent. "The European Commission will block it." "They won't block what they don't see," Sterling replied, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial whisper that Chloe could still hear perfectly, thanks to the acoustics of the alcove. "We are routing the secondary assets through a shell in Malta. By the time the Commission looks at the books, Rivière Tech will be gutted, and the assets will be under Sterling Corp. You take your payout, Antoine, and you retire to Provence. Your workers get fired, yes, but you get 40 million euros tonight." Chloe's hands shook as she arranged the breadbasket. He was going to gut the company. He was going to fire hundreds of people and hide the evidence in Malta. And he was dragging this proud, elderly Frenchman into a trap. "Hey, Bennett," Henry whispered, appearing at her elbow. "Why are you staring? Refill the water." He's intense," Chloe stammered, playing the part. "He's a billionaire. He can be whatever he wants," Henry snapped. "Go, and don't mess up." Chloe took the water pitcher. She had a choice. She could keep her head down, finish her shift, collect her tips, and go home to her studio apartment with the leaking ceiling. Or she could use the weapon Sterling had just handed her. She walked back to the table. Sterling was laughing again. "I bet she goes home to a cat and a microwave dinner," he joked in French to his associates, who laughed despite not understanding the language, just following his lead. "Probably thinks Bon Appetit is the name of a pop star." He looked up as Chloe poured his water. He felt untouchable. He felt like a god among insects. "More bread, sir?" Chloe asked. "Yes," Sterling said in English, dismissing her with a wave. Then, as she turned, he added in French, loud enough for the whole table to hear, "Make sure it's not stale, sweetie, though you probably can't tell the difference." That was it. The snap. It wasn't a loud snap. It was the quiet click of a lock turning. Chloe stopped. She didn't turn around immediately. She took a breath, inhaling the scent of the expensive wine and the cologne of a man who thought he owned the world. She turned slowly. She looked Sebastian Sterling dead in the eye. The vacuous look was gone. Her shoulders dropped their subservient slump. She stood tall, the posture of a girl who had attended the Lycée International. The table went quiet. They sensed the shift before she even opened her mouth. "Actually, Monsieur Sterling," Chloe began, her voice steady and clear. But she didn't continue in English. She switched. The silence that followed Chloe's pause was heavy, suffocating. It hung over table 4 like smoke. Chloe looked at Sebastian Sterling. Her eyes, previously dull and submissive, were now sharp, burning with a cold intelligence that seemed to lower the temperature of the room. She shifted her stance, locking her knees, her chin lifting just enough to look down her nose at him, a trick she had learned from her grandmother in the salons of the 16th arrondissement. "Actually, Monsieur Sterling," she repeated, her French flawless, the accent not just Parisian, but aristocratic, the clipped, precise diction of the elite. The bread is a sourdough from a starter culture that is 40 years old. It is significantly older and, frankly, has more culture than your entire company. Sterling froze. His glass of Waitress stopped halfway to his mouth. The smirk on his face didn't vanish instantly. It curdled, twisting into a look of bewildered processing. The two American associates, Miller and Davis, looked back and forth between the waitress and their boss, sensing the shift in tone, but not understanding the words. But Antoine Dubois understood. The old Frenchman's eyes went wide, his mouth falling open slightly. Chloe wasn't finished. The adrenaline was a roar in her ears, drowning out the fear of losing her job. She had lost so much already. She wouldn't lose her dignity to a man like this. "And regarding your assessment of my ambition," Chloe continued, her voice gaining strength, echoing slightly off the mahogany walls. "I assure you, my ambition is intact. It is merely currently focused on survival. However, since we are discussing things we cannot see, like your shell company in Malta, I believe the European Commission would be very interested to hear how you plan to gut Monsieur Dubois' life work to bypass antitrust regulations." The sound of a fork clinking against a plate rang out from across the room. Sterling slammed his wine glass down. The dark red liquid sloshed over the rim, staining the pristine white tablecloth like a gunshot wound. "What did you just say?" Sterling hissed in English, his face turning a dangerous shade of crimson. Chloe switched back to English effortlessly. "I said, Mr. Sterling, that the O2 vintage you are drinking requires patience to appreciate, much like business. Rushing a merger by hiding assets in Malta isn't just illegal. It's desperate. And desperation is a terrible cologne. You're wearing too much of it. You little—" Sterling scraped his chair back, standing up. He towered over her, radiating fury. "Who the hell do you think you are? I am the waitress you assumed was too stupid to understand you," Chloe said, holding her ground. She didn't flinch. "And you are the billionaire who just confessed to securities fraud in front of a witness." "Henry!" Sterling roared. The sound tore through the restaurant, silencing every other conversation. Diners at the other tables, CEOs, actresses, politicians, turned to watch the spectacle. Henri Gauthier materialized out of the ether, his face pale and sweating. He looked as though he were witnessing a murder. "Monsieur Sterling, please, Fire her!" Sterling spat, pointing a trembling finger at Chloe. "Get this distinct piece of trash out of my sight immediately, and I will see to it that she never works in this city again. I want her blacklisted. Do you hear me?" Henry turned to Chloe, his eyes bulging with panic. "Bennett, you are done. Get out. Leave your apron and get out now." Chloe slowly reached behind her back. She untied the apron strings. She folded the stained polyester square with deliberate, calm movements. She placed it gently on the table, right next to the spilled wine. "Gladly," Chloe said. "The tips here were lousy anyway." She turned to Antoine Dubois. The old man was staring at her, a strange mixture of shock and dawning realization on his face. "Monsieur Dubois," she said softly in French, "do not sign the papers. Not tonight. Check the EBITDA projections for the subsidiary. The numbers don't add up." "Get out!" Henry screamed, grabbing her arm. Chloe pulled her arm away sharply. "Don't touch me, Henri." She straightened her blazer, cast one last look of utter pity at Sebastian Sterling, and walked away. She walked through the dining room, head high, ignoring the whispers and the stares. She pushed through the kitchen doors, past a stunned Sarah, and out the back exit into the alley. The heavy steel door slammed shut behind her, cutting off the warmth and the smell of truffles. The alley was cold. The rain was coming down harder now, a freezing New York downpour that soaked her instantly. Chloe leaned against the brick wall, her legs finally giving way. She slid down until she was crouching on the wet pavement, burying her face in her hands. She was shaking. The adrenaline crash was hitting her hard. She had just insulted one of the most powerful men in New York. She had lost her job. She had rent due in 3 days. Stupid, she whispered to herself, wiping rain and tears from her cheeks. So stupid, Chloe. Proud and stupid. She sat there for 5 minutes, letting the rain wash away the smell of the restaurant. She was just about to stand up and begin the long, miserable walk to the subway when the steel door opened again. Light spilled into the alley. Chloe flinched, expecting Henry coming to scream at her some more, or maybe security coming to throw her off the property. But it wasn't Henry. An umbrella opened with a soft thwump. "Mademoiselle," a voice called out. It was accented, gentle, and old. Chloe squinted into the light. Antoine Dubois stepped into the alley, holding a large black umbrella. He was flanked by his personal security guard, a massive man who stayed by the door, but Dubois walked straight toward her. He held the umbrella over her, shielding her from the downpour. "You're soaking wet," Dubois said. Chloe stood up slowly, hugging her arms around herself. "I'll dry. Go back inside, Monsieur Dubois. Sterling will be wondering where his victim went." Dubois chuckled, a dry, rasping sound. "He is currently screaming at his lawyers on the phone. The mood has been spoiled. Thanks to you." "I shouldn't have said that," Chloe muttered. "It wasn't my place." "On the contrary," Dubois said, his eyes twinkling in the dim light. "It was the most honest thing anyone has said to me in 3 weeks of negotiations." He studied her face. "You speak the French of the haute bourgeoisie. And you know what EBITDA is. Who are you?" "Really?" Chloe hesitated. The name was a curse in these circles, but looking at this man who had defended her in the restaurant, she felt a flicker of trust. "My name is Chloe Beaumont," she said quietly. Dubois inhaled sharply. "Beaumont? Not the Beaumonts? The shipping magnates? Richard Beaumont's daughter?" "He was my father," Chloe said, looking at her shoes. "Before the indictment, before the seizure of assets, before the suicide." The silence stretched between them, filled only by the sound of rain drumming on the umbrella. The Beaumont collapse had been the scandal of the decade, a Ponzi scheme, accusations that turned out to be a setup, but the defense came too late. Her father had taken his life before his name was cleared, leaving Chloe and her mother with nothing but debts and a blackened name. "I see," Dubois said softly. "I knew your father. He was a hard man, but he was a man of honor. I never believed the charges." "You were in the minority," Chloe said bitterly. Dubois shifted the umbrella to ensure she was fully covered. "You warned me about the Malta shell." "How did you know?" "I listen," Chloe said. "Sterling thinks service staff are furniture. He's been bragging about the structure of the deal all night. He's planning to leverage the debt onto Rivière Tech's books, strip the patents, and then let the manufacturing arm go bankrupt. He's not acquiring you, monsieur. He's harvesting you." Dubois' face hardened. The kindly grandfather look vanished, replaced by the steel of a captain of industry. "I suspected, but I could not prove it. My lawyers are cautious, and Sterling's team is very good at burying details." He reached into his breast pocket and pulled out a linen handkerchief, offering it to her. "Mademoiselle Beaumont," Dubois said, "I have a proposition for you." "I don't need charity," Chloe said, wiping her face. "This is not charity. It is war," Dubois replied. "Tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., the final signing is scheduled at Sterling's headquarters at Hudson Yards. I need someone who understands his language, both the French he uses to mock me and the financial English he uses to cheat me. He pulled a business card from his wallet. I want to hire you, Dubois said. As my external consultant for the duration of this negotiation, your fee will be $10,000 per day. Chloe stared at him. 10,000. That's pocket change compared to what Sterling is trying to steal from me. Dubois cut her off. I need ears that hear everything, and I need a voice that isn't afraid to speak the truth. You proved tonight you have both. He'll throw me out, Chloe said. He'll have security drag me from the building. Dubois smiled, and this time it was a predator's smile. Let him try. You will be walking in on my arm. If he throws you out, he throws the deal out. Will you help me teach this boy a lesson? Chloe looked at the card. Antoine Dubois, CEO, Rivière Tech. She looked at the rain-slicked alley. Then she thought of Sebastian Sterling's face when she had corrected him about the bread. She thought of the way he had looked at Sarah. I don't have anything to wear, Chloe said. Dubois gestured to the waiting town car at the end of the alley. Then we have work to do. The shops on Fifth Avenue are closed, but I know people who will open them for the right price. Chloe took the card. Okay, let's go to war. The suite at the Pierre Hotel was larger than Chloe's entire apartment building. It was filled with racks of clothing that had been rushed over from Bergdorf Goodman at midnight. Chloe stood in front of a floor-length mirror. The waitress uniform was in the trash can. In its place, she wore a charcoal grey power suit by Saint Laurent. It was sharp, architectural, and intimidating. The trousers were tailored to perfection, the blazer cinched at the waist. She wore a silk cream blouse underneath, and her hair, usually trapped in that severe bun, was now blown out in soft, formidable waves that framed her face. She didn't look like a victim anymore. She looked like a Beaumont. Better, Dubois said, sitting in an armchair with a cup of espresso. It was 7:15 a.m. Neither of them had slept much. They had spent the night going over the prospectus documents Dubois had on his secure server. Chloe had been right. It was a massacre disguised as a merger. Page 405, Chloe said, pointing to the tablet screen. Here, subsection C, reallocation of pension liabilities. He's not just dissolving the fund, he's converting it into company stock options that vest in 5 years. If the company goes bankrupt in 3, which it will, based on the debt load he's adding, your workers get 0. Dubois' hand shook as he held his coffee. He looked me in the eye and told me their pensions were guaranteed. He lied, Chloe said simply. And here, the IP transfer. The patents for your new water filtration system aren't going to Rivière Tech post-merger. They are being licensed to Sterling Global Holdings Malta for $1 a year. So he steals the technology, bankrupts the factory, and keeps the profit tax-free, Dubois murmured. It is monstrous. It's standard private equity raiding, Chloe said. My father fought off guys like this for years, until he couldn't. Dubois stood up. He walked over to her. You are brilliant, Chloe. Why were you waiting tables? Because nobody hires a Beaumont in finance anymore, she said, adjusting her cuffs. The name is toxic. HR algorithms filter my resume out before a human ever sees it. Then we will force them to see it, Dubois said. He checked his watch. The car is downstairs. Are you ready to see Monsieur Sterling again? Chloe looked at her reflection. She applied a coat of dark red lipstick, a shade called Revenge, fittingly enough. I can't wait, she said. The Sterling Corp headquarters at Hudson Yards was a monument to ego. It was a spike of glass and steel piercing the sky. The boardroom was on the 80th floor, offering a panoramic view of the city Sebastian Sterling believed he owned. The room was cold, air-conditioned to a frigid temperature. A long table of black obsidian dominated the space. Sebastian Sterling sat at the head, looking fresh and rested, showing no signs of the embarrassment from the night before. He was flanked by a phalanx of lawyers from Sullivan and Cromwell and his sycophantic associates, Miller and Davis. They were all smiling. They thought the deal was done. They had the champagne chilling on a side cart. "Gentlemen," Sterling said, checking his watch. "Dubois is late. Typical French punctuality." "Maybe he's having second thoughts about the price?" Davis joked. Sterling laughed. "He has no choice. His stock is down 15% this quarter. I'm his lifeboat. He'll sign whatever I put in front of him." The double doors at the far end of the room swung open. "Monsieur Antoine Dubois," the receptionist announced nervously. Dubois walked in. He walked with a new vigor, his back straight. And walking right beside him, matching him stride for stride, was a woman. Sterling squinted. He didn't recognize her at first. The hair was different. The clothes were expensive, tasteful, understated wealth. She carried a leather portfolio under her arm and walked with a predatory grace. It wasn't until they were 10 feet away that Sterling's eyes went wide. He stood up, his chair scraping loudly. "You have got to be kidding me." Chloe stopped across the table from him. She didn't smile. She placed her portfolio on the black obsidian table with a heavy thud. "Good morning, Mr. Sterling," she said. Her voice was calm, professional. "I believe we have some unfinished business regarding the bread." "What is she doing here?" Sterling demanded, turning to Dubois. "Antoine, why did you bring the help? This is a closed-door meeting." "This is my advisor," Dubois said, coolly, taking a seat. "Mademoiselle Beaumont." "Beaumont?" Sterling's head snapped back to Chloe. "Wait, Beaumont? As in Richard Beaumont?" "My father," Chloe said. "I assume you've heard of him. He taught me how to read a balance sheet before I could read a fairy tale." Sterling's face went pale, then red. "This is ridiculous. She's a waitress. I fired her last night. Get security." "If you call security," Dubois said, his voice dropping an octave, "I will walk out that door, and I will take my company to the auction block. I hear BlackRock is looking for European tech assets." The room went silent. The lawyers looked at each other nervously. Sterling clenched his jaw. He couldn't lose this deal. He had already promised the board the acquisition. "Fine," Sterling spat, sitting down. "Let her stay. It doesn't matter. The contracts are drawn. Standard boilerplate. Just sign them, Antoine, and let's get this over with." He slid a thick stack of documents across the table. Chloe put a hand on Dubois' arm, stopping him from reaching for the pen. "Not so fast," Chloe said. She didn't sit down. She remained standing, commanding the room. "We won't be signing the standard boilerplate, because I've read your standard boilerplate, and I found it lacking." "Lacking?" Sterling's lead lawyer, a sharp-faced man named Harrison, scoffed. "Young lady, these documents were drafted by the finest legal minds in New York." "Then the finest legal minds in New York seem to have forgotten about Article 102 of the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union regarding abuse of dominant market position," Chloe shot back. She opened her portfolio and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "And," she continued, her eyes locking onto Sterling's, "they also seemed to have made a typo regarding the intellectual property transfer." "There is no typo," Sterling said through gritted teeth. "Oh?" Chloe raised an eyebrow. "Then why are the patents being routed to Sterling Malta Holdings, a company that, according to the Maltese Business Registry, was incorporated 3 days ago and lists its primary address as a mailbox in Valletta?" The lawyers froze. Harrison began frantically flipping through his copy of the contract. Sterling's confidence cracked. That is for tax efficiency. It's asset stripping, Chloe said, and we know about the pension fund. She leaned over the table, placing her hands flat on the cold stone. Here are the new terms, Chloe said. The purchase price remains the same, but the pension fund is ring-fenced in an escrow account managed by a third party. The patents remain with the French entity, and there will be a 10-year employment guarantee for the Lion Factory workers, with a penalty of $1 million per employee for early termination. Sterling laughed. It was a forced, desperate sound. You're insane. I'd never agree to that. The deal is worthless to me with those terms. Then there is no deal, Chloe said. She closed her portfolio. Ready to go, Antoine? Dubois stood up. Ready. They turned to leave. Wait, Sterling yelled. He was breathing hard. He looked at his lawyers. Harrison shook his head slightly, signaling that they were cornered. If Dubois walked, the stock drop would trigger a margin call on Sterling's own loans. He was over-leveraged. He needed Riviere Tech's cash flow, even if he couldn't strip the assets immediately. Sterling looked at Chloe with pure hatred. You think you're smart, don't you? The little princess playing business? I'm not playing, Sebastian, Chloe said, using his first name for the first time. I'm working, and I speak the language. Sterling slumped in his chair. Fine. Ring-fence the pensions. Keep the patents in France. But I want the employment guarantee dropped to 5 years. Chloe looked at Dubois. He gave a subtle nod. 5 years was enough to get the next generation of leadership in place. 7 years, Chloe countered, and a seat on the board for Monsieur Dubois. Done, Sterling growled. Just give me the damn pen. The lawyers scrambled to draft the riders. The room buzzed with tension. Chloe sat down next to Dubois. Under the table, her hands were shaking, but on the surface, she was stone. As the new contracts were printed, Sterling stared at her. You know, he said, his voice low and venomous. You made an enemy today, Miss Beaumont. A very powerful one. You'll never work in this town. I'll make sure of it. Chloe smiled. It was the first genuine smile she had worn in years. Mr. Sterling, she said, after the commission I'm making on this deal, I don't think I'll need to work for a while. But when I do, I think I'll aim a little higher than Waitress. She signed as the witness on the document. But the drama wasn't over. As the ink dried, the double doors opened again. This time it wasn't a receptionist. 4 men in windbreakers walked in. On the back of their jackets, in bright yellow letters, was written, SEC. Leading them was a woman with a stern face and a badge on her belt. Sebastian Sterling, she asked. Sterling stood up, confusion replacing his anger. Who are you? You can't just barge in here. I'm Special Agent Miller, Securities and Exchange Commission, the woman said. We have a warrant for the seizure of all electronic records regarding Sterling Global Holdings Malta. Sterling looked at Chloe. His eyes were wide with betrayal. You called them. Chloe stood up, picking up her portfolio. I didn't call them, she said calmly. But remember the dinner last night, when you were bragging to your friends? There was a man at table 5, eating alone. He looked like a tourist. She paused for effect. He wasn't a tourist, Chloe said. He was a field agent. You were so busy mocking the waitress, you didn't notice the wire. The agents moved in. Sterling was shouting, his lawyers were shouting, but the chaos seemed distant to Chloe. Dubois stood up and buttoned his jacket. Shall we go, Chloe? I believe lunch is on me, and I know a place where the staff is treated with respect. I'd like that, Chloe said. They walked out of the boardroom, leaving the shouting and the ruin of Sebastian Sterling behind them. The news of the SEC raid on Sterling Corp hit the news cycle like a meteor strike. Stocks plummeted. The footage of Sebastian Sterling being escorted out of his own building, shielding his face with a tailored jacket, played on a loop on the giant screens in Times Square. But for Chloe, the victory felt incomplete. It was a sugar rush that was fading fast, replaced by a gnawing suspicion that had taken root in the back of her mind during the boardroom showdown. 2 days after the raid, Chloe sat in a quiet, high-end cafe in Soho with Antoine Dubois. The rain had finally stopped, leaving the city scrubbed clean and grey. "You should be smiling, ma chère," Dubois said, breaking a croissant. "You have just earned a commission of $400,000. You have taken down a titan. Why do you look like you are solving a difficult equation?" Chloe stirred her black coffee. "The shell company, Antoine. Sterling Global Holdings Malta." "Yes, it is seized, frozen." "It's the structure," Chloe said, her voice low. "When I was looking at the documents in the boardroom, the specific routing of the assets, the use of a double Irish with a Dutch sandwich tax avoidance scheme, layered over a Maltese trust. It was handwriting. Handwriting. Financial handwriting," Chloe explained. "Every CFO has a signature style, a way they hide money. This specific structure wasn't just similar to the one that framed my father 3 years ago. It was identical." Dubois frowned. "You think Sterling was involved in the Beaumont collapse?" "My father was accused of embezzling client funds through a shell company in the Cayman Islands. He swore until the day he died that he didn't set it up, that someone had mirrored his accounts and siphoned the money." Chloe looked up, her eyes hard. "Sebastian Sterling was a junior analyst at my father's firm 5 years ago. He left 6 months before the scandal broke to start his own hedge fund. With what capital?" "Nobody ever asked." Dubois set down his cup. The atmosphere at the table shifted from celebratory to conspiratorial. "You think Sterling stole the money from your father, framed him, and used the capital to build his own empire?" "I think," Chloe said, standing up, "that I need to see the files the SEC seized." Getting access to federal evidence was impossible for a civilian, but Chloe wasn't just a civilian anymore. She was the star witness. She met Agent Miller, the woman from the boardroom, at a sterile diner in New Jersey, far away from the prying eyes of Wall Street. "I can't show you the files, Miss Beaumont," Miller said, eating a salad with mechanical precision. "It's an active investigation." "I don't need to see them," Chloe said. "I just need you to look for one thing. A search term." Miller sighed. "You gave us the tip that broke the case. I owe you one. But just one. What am I looking for?" "Project Icarus," Chloe said. "It was my father's code name for his retirement plan. If Sterling stole the files, he might have kept the naming convention out of arrogance." Miller tapped something into her secure phone. She frowned. She scrolled. Then her eyebrows shot up. "I'm seeing a folder named Icarus Legacy on Sterling's private server," Miller said slowly. "Creation date, 4 years ago." "Open it," Chloe whispered. Miller hesitated, then tapped the screen. She read in silence for a long minute. When she looked up, her expression was grim. "It's not just financial data, Miss Beaumont. It's logs, chat logs, emails, wire transfers." "Is there a transfer to an account under the name Richard Beaumont?" "No," Miller said. "There's a transfer from Richard Beaumont's operational account, $50 million. Moved to an account in the Caymans. Beneficiary, S. Sterling." Chloe let out a breath she felt like she had been holding for 3 years. Tears pricked her eyes, but they weren't tears of sadness. They were tears of relief. Her father hadn't been a thief. He had been a victim of the man who had just tried to humiliate her for not speaking French. "That's proof," Chloe said, her voice shaking. "That clears his name." "It does more than that," Miller said, closing her phone. "This elevates the charges from securities fraud to grand larceny and money laundering. Sterling isn't just looking at fines. He's looking at 20 years in federal prison." "There's one more thing," Chloe said, a cold resolve settling over her. "Sterling is out on bail right now, isn't he?" "Yes. House arrest at his penthouse." "Why?" "Because," Chloe said, standing up and smoothing her Saint Laurent blazer. "I think it's time the waitress returned his tip." The penthouse at 432 Park Avenue was quiet. Sebastian Sterling sat alone in the dark, drinking whiskey that tasted like ash. His phone had stopped ringing. His friends had stopped calling. His lawyers were discussing plea deals. When the buzzer rang, he ignored it. But the doorman called up. "Mr. Sterling, there's a Miss Beaumont here to see you. She says she has something you dropped." Sterling's first instinct was to tell her to go to hell, but curiosity, that fatal flaw, gnawed at him. He wanted to see her gloat. He wanted to scream at her. "Send her up," he croaked. When the elevator doors opened, Chloe stepped into the penthouse. She didn't look triumphant. She looked like an executioner. Sterling remained seated on his Italian leather sofa, looking disheveled. He hadn't shaved in 2 days. "Came to dance on the grave?" Sterling sneered. "Or are you looking for a job? I hear Le Miroir is hiring." Chloe walked across the room. She stood over him. "I spoke to the SEC today, Sebastian." Sterling laughed bitterly. "I'm sure you did. You're their new golden girl. We found Project Icarus." The laughter died in Sterling's throat. His face went grey. The glass of whiskey slipped from his fingers and tumbled onto the rug, but it didn't break. It just rolled, spilling amber liquid. "I don't know what you're talking about," he whispered. "You were his protégé," Chloe said, her voice trembling with suppressed rage. "He trusted you. He invited you to our home for Christmas, and you stole everything. You drove him to the edge of that bridge." "It was business," Sterling shouted, standing up suddenly. "He was old. He was losing his edge. He was sitting on a capital he was too afraid to use. I liberated it." "You killed him," Chloe said. "He killed himself," Sterling yelled, "because he was weak, just like you." Chloe took a step closer. She wasn't afraid. "I am not weak, Sebastian. I survived losing my father. I survived losing my fortune. I survived scrubbing floors and serving wine to arrogant parasites like you for 3 years. And do you know what I learned?" She leaned in, her face inches from his. "I learned that service isn't servitude, it's observation. I learned to watch people, and I watched you destroy yourself." She reached into her pocket and pulled out a small, folded piece of paper. It was the receipt from Le Miroir from that night. The one he had left blank on the tip line. She dropped it on his chest. "You're going to prison, Sebastian. For a very long time. And when you're in the cafeteria, standing in line with a plastic tray, I want you to remember the waitress." She turned to leave. "Wait," Sterling pleaded, his voice cracking. He sounded like a child now. "Chloe, please, we can make a deal. I still have money hidden. Crypto, diamonds. I can give you half. 20 million. Just tell the SEC you were mistaken about the file." Chloe stopped at the elevator. She didn't look back. "I don't speak thief, Sebastian," she said. "I only speak the truth." The doors closed, sealing him in his golden cage. 1 year later. The rain in Paris was different than the rain in New York. It was softer, romantic. It made the cobblestones of the Marais glisten like jewels. Chloe sat at a corner table at L'Ambroisie, one of the finest restaurants in the city. She wasn't wearing a uniform. She was wearing a custom Chanel suit in pale pink. Across from her sat Antoine Dubois. He looked younger than he had a year ago. The stress of the hostile takeover was gone, replaced by the satisfaction of a man whose legacy was secure. "The numbers for the quarter are exceptional, Chloe," Dubois said, reviewing the dossier she had brought. "Since you took over as Chief Strategy Officer, our Asian market share has tripled." "We just stopped underestimating the local competition," Chloe said with a smile. "And we treated the partners with respect." "A novel concept," Dubois chuckled. He raised his glass of champagne. "To the 1-year anniversary of the partnership." "To partnership," Chloe clinked her glass against his. The waiter arrived with the menus. He was young, nervous. His hands shook slightly as he handed the heavy leather booklet to Chloe. "Bon appétit, madame," he stammered. Chloe looked at him. She saw the frayed cuff of his shirt. She saw the exhaustion in his eyes. She saw herself. "Thank you," she said warmly. She looked at his name tag. "Jean-Paul." "Yes, madame." "Take a breath," she said in French. "You're doing fine. But table 7 needs water, and your manager is watching you. Go fill their glasses, then come back and take our order. I'll cover for you." The boy looked at her with wide eyes, relieved. "Thank you, madame. Thank you." He rushed off. Dubois smiled at her. "You haven't forgotten." "I'll never forget," Chloe said. "It's my superpower." Her phone buzzed on the table. It was a notification from the New York Times app. Breaking. Sebastian Sterling, sentenced to 25 years for fraud and grand larceny. Beaumont family name, officially cleared by federal judge. Chloe stared at the screen. A picture of her father accompanied the article. It was an old photo, one where he was smiling. She felt a weight lift off her shoulders that she hadn't realized was still there. It was over. Truly over. The ghost was at rest. "Good news?" Dubois asked. "The best," Chloe said. She put the phone away. She didn't need to read the article. She had lived it. "So," Dubois said, leaning back, "what is next for Chloe Beaumont? You have wealth, you have power, you have your name back. What do you want?" Chloe looked out the window at the Place des Vosges. She thought about the penthouse in New York she had just bought, the one Sterling used to own, bought at a foreclosure auction for pennies on the dollar. She thought about the foundation she was starting to help service workers get degrees in finance. "I want to order dessert," Chloe said, her eyes twinkling. "Dessert?" "Yes," Chloe smiled. "I hear they have a sourdough here that is legendary, but I want to see if it's fresh." She signaled for Jean-Paul. When he returned, calmer now, she smiled at him. "Tell me, Jean-Paul," she asked, "how is the millefeuille today?" "It is excellent, madame. Made this morning." "Perfect," Chloe said. "We'll take 2. And Jean-Paul?" "Yes, madame. When you bring the check, add a 20% tip for yourself, and tell your manager that Chloe Beaumont said you have excellent potential." The boy beamed. "Yes." "Madame Beaumont?" Chloe took a sip of her champagne. It tasted like victory. It tasted like freedom. She had walked through the fire, armed only with a tray and her dignity, and she had come out the other side not just alive, but reigning. She wasn't the girl in the glass cage anymore. She was the one holding the keys. And that, my friends, is why you should never judge someone by their uniform. Sebastian Sterling thought power was a suit and a bank account, but Chloe proved that true power is intelligence, resilience, and the ability to listen when others are just hearing themselves talk. She turned a moment of humiliation into a masterclass in revenge. If you enjoyed this story of karma and corporate justice, smash that like button. It really helps the channel grow. And if you want more stories about underdogs taking down giants, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell so you never miss a video. What would you have done if you were in Chloe's shoes? Would you have taken the money or served the justice? Let me know in the comments below. Until next time.